Welcome to today's Humanities Institute event. This year, the Scripps College Humanities Institute is presenting a broader history of thought, where we focus on non-European foundational ideas on their own terms. As usual, audience members can ask questions for the speaker using the Q&A function, and I'll read them aloud, time permitting, during the discussion period after the talk. Those of you who are on the panel can ask your questions when the time comes, simply by unmuting and speaking. It's a real privilege for us to have today Dr. Ann Waters. Dr. Waters holds a JD from the University of New Mexico Law School and a Ph.D. in philosophy from Purdue University. She is of Seminole, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Jewish descent, and her contributions to our understanding of American Indian thought have been monumental. She has been a Rockefeller Scholar and a recipient of both NEH and NSF grants. Dr. Waters has published in several international philosophy and American Indian journals and anthologies. She's edited the only anthology by American Indians holding a PhD in philosophy, entitled American Indian Thought, Philosophical Essays. She's co-edited American Philosophies, an anthology in Blackwell Oxford. Co-guest edited a special issue of Hypatia, a Journal of Feminist Philosophy, entitled Indigenous Women in the Americas, and co-edited the Living Indigenous Philosophies Series by SUNY Press. She's published her own work far and wide, including The Dance of Person and Place, One Interpretation of American Indian Philosophy, and Listening to Ourselves, a multilingual anthology of African philosophy. Dr. Waters has also played important administrative roles in the field of philosophy. She's founder and past chair of the American Philosophical Association Native American and Indigenous Philosophy Committee, originating editor and current co-editor of the APA newsletter on Native American and Indigenous philosophy, and she serves on the APA Board of Officers Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion. Dr. Waters is not only an accomplished philosopher, but also a poet, lawyer, editor, mediator, and feminist. So it's a real honor to welcome our guest speaker today, Dr. Ann Waters.
Thank you, Yuval. I'm pleased to be here this evening. Hansi, Yaate, and good evening to each of you. Let me say first, I'm very appreciative and honored and thankful tonight for the many generations of indigenous tribes on whose lands we share this evening from the west to the east coast. I am thankful to those who have been stewards, protectors of our people and all of life. With them and our audience, I celebrate our sovereignty and pray that our creative powers will continue to guide us in our understanding of life in all of its manifestations. I especially thank Scripps College, the Humanities Institute, for making this program possible. I thank you, Yuval, Rebecca, Marcy, Jacob, for your presence, for your patience, for your guidance and thoughtful assistance to help host me here this evening. I thank our students, who are very special always, because you must be tired at this point after long days of work. But I know you have also prepared for this lecture this evening. Just keep yourself awake, if nothing else. I thank the community members who have taken the time to support and participate in this program and the other programs the Institute is doing. I appreciate the academic interest here in non-mainstream philosophical thought, Yuval, and I also appreciate the trust of my scholarship and the invitation to join you tonight. Thank you for welcoming me from the Southeast Florida lands of the Seminole to the lands of the many tribes of the Southwest, hailing me from the swamps where I live to the deserts once again. This evening, we will talk about understandings of American Indian thought, where we belong, life, land, spirit. In doing so, we will contemplate why and how it is that all life is sacred, as Marilyn Nota Vernay, a Diné woman, a colleague of mine, and a very close friend, writes, because a native understanding of life extends to all that is, the entire universe participates in life process. In other words, we are thinking about how all life is sacred, our place is our land, and our spirits animate all living being in the universe. In so doing, my research draws upon two important texts. Slide 1, please, Jacob. The first text is molded in the image of changing woman, Navajo views of the human body and personhood. It's written by Maureen Trudell Schwartz, who is an anthropologist, published out of the University of Arizona Press in Tucson in 1997. Very important book. And could I have slide 2, please, Jacob? The second book is written by a friend of mine, Greg Cajete. It's called Look to the Mountain, an Ecology of Indigenous Education. Greg has probably written at least 7 books by now. And I have to say, of the ones I've read, which are most all of them, I would recommend any of them. This was published in 1994 by Kivaki Press. And I know the students have been given a section of this to read in preparation for this evening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Okay. Could you put up slide 5, please, Jacob? Okay. As a prelude to my presentation, I am showing you this chart, and I will refer to it again later. As you can see, my lecture consists of 3 main parts of laying out what I call a metaphysics of Diné thought. Now, Roman numeral 1 up there says life, animated. All things have life. We'll talk about that more as we discuss the laws, the elements, and the structure. Roman numeral 2 is the land metaphor. And I will talk briefly about the origination story. Some call it the principle of generation. In fact, Marilyn Verney's master's thesis at the University of California, Santa Barbara, is on principle of generation, Navajo principle of generation. And Roman numeral 3, I will talk about spirit being in place and try to tie things together there for you. Within these 3 main parts, you'll notice each part has a subsection. And our first part consists of laying out the laws of what we call the principles of similarity, the principle of attraction, opposite, the principle of repel, and synecdoche, which is a transfer principle. The second part is about the 4 elements, and the 4 elements of Navajo thought would be moisture, air, substance, heat, and vibration, or what you might call flux. Some people have suggested that sound might be another element, particularly as it relates to voice and language. Some say that sound is manifested in language and voice, thus should be a 5th element. We won't get into that this evening. The third part is structure, that all things have direction. For example, things are circular. They have trajectory, upwardness, everything grows upward, for example. And they have binary oppositions, like left and right, up and down, in, out. The fourth part here, that of metaphor, I will use part A, B, and C to express meaning. I ask you to remember this evening that metaphor is fundamental to understanding Diné metaphysics. It applies to all story, including the origin story that will be told here briefly today. Okay, if you would remove slide 3. Let us look closer now at the 3 laws or principles of Diné metaphysics: similarity, opposite, and synecdoche. The law of similars is sameness, that like produces like or attracts like. For example, water produces a fountain and mist produces rain. The law of opposites is that opposites work on opposing forces. So for example, night repels day, day repels night. Stones repel water. If you have a flow of coming down the river and the stones are there, it will repel the water. And if you turn magnets around, of course, they will repel one another. So that's the law of opposites. Now, the first two laws are not too difficult. Similar attract similar and opposites repel opposites. The third one is a little bit trickier. And this is called the law of synecdoche. It's an associative transfer principle of properties. Associative transfer principle of properties. For example, a part continues in a whole such that a transfer of, let's say, DNA, saliva, sweat, hair, or a clone can fully reconstitute a whole. You can get through saliva cold, through the sweat you can get COVID, etc. So night and day can make such a transfer, as is shown by the Venn diagram if you look at the bottom, where we have night, which is X, and day, which is Y. And then we have the intersection where they're mingling and pushing apart. And of course, day manages to come forth. And then the same thing happens as night comes on. And this is a good example also of a circular pattern. You may hear that everything is circular in most indigenous thought. And you see the pattern operative here. Okay, can you remove slide 3, please? I want to talk about synecdoche for a minute now. The third law, that is synecdoche, transfer law, is most important. It means that the effect of contact continues even after separation and may be permanent and transformative. Simply put, parts effect wholes. For example, contact can extend the physical boundaries of a person, such that everything that comes into contact with a person, clothes, footprints, imprints on bed, can affect and be affected by a contact. This principle leads to complex behavioral rules about restrictions and prohibitions in Navajo thought. It is about what can affect who or how during certain behaviors. For example, social behaviors of women's seasonal taboos. Hence, the gaze of health or illness can be a cultural gaze about proper functioning, normative to a culture. Ideas about the body as normative ideas of the self are cultural constructs, and hence constructed differently in different cultural groups. And characteristics of animated persons or beings can be extended where the boundaries of persons are extended via synecdoche to both animate and inanimate, human and non-human, being via contact. Siblings, children, deer, homes, mountains, baskets, clothing, all of these things can participate in this principle. Now, this third principle or law of synecdoche is most important for grasping the metaphorical nature of Navajo knowing. We sustain and we are sustained by life through these effects of contact that continue after separation. Slide 4, please. There is a buildup to all of this. Now, as to the elements, we have moisture, air, substance, heat, and vibration. And you'll hear me say those several times. We can say that all entities in the Navajo world consist of the primary elements, moisture, air, substance, and heat, which are permeated by vibration or flux. And these elements share structural features such that there is a sunrise directionality, a trajectory of growth from the ground upward, and a series of binary oppositions to distinguish inside from outside and left from right. Okay, remove the slide, please. Now, as for metaphor and synecdoche, what I call metaphorical epistemology, S.Waters, in Molded in the Image of Changing Woman, puts it this way. This is so in the Navajo world, where non-human entities, homes, birds, mountains, baskets, have qualities of personhood, where membership in the community of life is based on shared composition and structure, and where the boundaries of persons are extended by synecdoche. In this way, my personhood is extended to you via my voice today, this evening. And in this same way, I, or my personhood, becomes a part of your whole. And in this way, we are, or we live in, reciprocity with all that is in nature and in our universe. Now, the following is an example of the law of this philosophical principle of synecdoche. Schwartz is being instructed on the disposal of her daughter's shampoo rinse water. Reagan is her daughter, and Reagan is about to participate in a canal ceremony. The canal ceremony is the girl's puberty ceremony. And there's also a ceremony for the young men when they get a certain age as well into puberty. So if you would put up slide 6, please. I'll let you read along with me so as not to bore you too much as I read a story. Hope everybody can read it well. I can. Now, Sadie, it begins talking about Sadie. Say is a Dene woman. And Maureen Schwartz has been working with Sadie in the process of doing her research for her book. And now her daughter is to have a Gnalda ceremony. And Sadie, who is there as a Dene woman and assisting, is going to instruct Maureen about her daughter's hair rinse. You rinse the hair, you have a ceremony. You rinse the hair. Sadie, and I'm quoting here now, Sadie vigorously rubbed the yucca root. Yucca root is used because it's like a shampoo, it makes soap. As I poured the hot water into the basket. Next, Sadie gently washed Reagan's hair in the warm sudsy mixture, carefully collecting the rinse water in a pan under Reagan's head. With her wet hair streaming around her face and shoulders, Reagan jumped up and ran clockwise out of the hohan into the pre-dawn chill. The hohan is the small house. She ran down the hill toward the east, followed by a small group of people who were yelling so that the holy people would hear. At the conclusion of the public operation of the ceremony, Sadie guided me in the proper disposal of the shampoo rinse water. She told me to dispose of it just outside the door. She cautioned, pour it gently. Pour it gently. Do not let it splash. Sadie said this was so no harm would come to Reagan. Sadie instructed me further that after the required hold period, Reagan's hair must be washed at dawn and the rinse water saved. She told me to pour the rinse water around the perimeter of our home so that Reagan would always be drawn back to home. Thank you, Jacob. Now, if we assume that wholes are made up of integrated components, then parts have effect upon wholes, such that anything done to a part will have effect upon that whole, then you've got the principle of synecdoche. And your being separated from me in distance this evening does not disturb the continuity of that contact. Voice. Thus, the extension of my personhood due to synecdoche gives us a sense of how things are related in our natural world. What I think about my body and its ability to extend into the world via synecdoche is, of course, a cultural construct, and my understanding of my bodily processes and health or illness reflects a social world or social constructs as understood by a cultural metaphorical thought. Let me read that again. As understood by a cultural metaphorical thought. My body is, and I reflect, an understanding of social, metaphorical, and metaphysical existence. If I am alive, then I am reciprocally alive with all things in the universe. How could it be otherwise? Moisture, air, heat, substance, and permeating vibration, flux. I will turn momentarily to the Diné origin story as metaphor for how bodies interact in the world with these 5 elements, reflecting both the structure and composition of boundaries extended by this principle of synecdoche. Metaphor and story play a significant role in the development of Diné philosophical system. The stories have explanatory and predictive powers that serve to guide Diné through various stages of life. The stories and ritual embed rules of order and govern human behavior that enables individuals and kin to enhance or negate the influence of effects in the world upon our web of life. There are many levels of understanding relations on Earth's surface. Each level of abstraction is intended to address those who seek understanding of this effect at deeper, or some say higher, levels. As Diné travel from being born, being small children, through puberty, marriage, childbirth, old age, and eventually encountering the passing on. It is hoped that our understanding of the role of metaphorical knowledge expands our understanding of principles of action and value throughout our lives. You see how the principle of metaphor is coming into play here. I hope you see it. I hope I've made it clear. I want to go on now to part 2. And I apologize, I do want slide 5 up very briefly. I just want to point out to you the process and how we're, yes, okay. This is what I showed at the beginning of the presentation, and we have talked about the laws of similar, opposite, and the important principle of synecdoche. We have mentioned the elements of moisture, air, substance, heat, and vibration, or flux. And we have talked about the structures of direction, up. I mean, circular trajectory goes up, and binary oppositions. And so, having talked a little bit about the metaphor in the rinse story, I turn now to part 2, and we will go on to metaphor a little bit deeper and the originating land metaphor of the Diné, and then I'll finish up with spirit being place. Okay, if we can remove that now. I want to begin this section with another quote by Marilyn Notaverne, and it goes like this. If non-natives can understand our traditional spiritual relationship with the land and its connection within the universe, then all things have life, that all things have life. Then one can better understand our people, our culture, and our traditional beliefs. And I would add, and one can understand better one another. For Diné thought, entities consist of primary elements of moisture, air, substance, and heat, permeated by vibration. Now, these elements share structural features such as sunrise directionality, a trajectory of growth from the ground upward, and a series of binary oppositions to distinguish inside from outside and left from right. In this way, relations among entities that share these characteristics are kinship relations, such as earth, sky, sun, moon, rain, water, lightning, and thunder. And the boundaries of these entities are extended by synecdoche of sharing of this composition and structure. Thus, non-human entities share qualities of what we might call personhood. And in this sense, personhood consists of shared relations. And relations bring with them reciprocal human rights, reciprocal cultural rights, rituals, ties, and obligations, where homes, birds, mountains, and baskets, for example, have shared composition and structure. Our persons, for example, we have human personhood, bird personhood, and tree personhood. And each of these boundaries are extended by synecdoche, which is a sharing of composition and structure. Diné say a mountain's feet, base, are planted in the earth, Mother Earth, and the mountain's head in the sky, Father Sky. Metaphor, as representing a structure of relations, likeness, opposites, and synecdoche, are created and reproduced in practice and ritual. To have your feet planted in the earth and head in the sky is to be like birds and other animals, plants and other living vegetation, and mountains and valleys, which all think, speak, and are alive. They have direction and trajectory. Humans are made in an image of that in the universe which preceded us, for we are of the universe. So also for entities that are persons, though not human persons. Our human body and our personhood are that which is embedded in an understanding of composition and structure of the universe, or how the universe is constructed and characteristics of the relations of life in that world. In a Diné construction of a metaphoric world paradigm, human health is intimately linked to social roles, human behavior, and synecdoche. In such a world, mountains have feet and can think and be animated. They are alive and participate in the synecdoche of their universe. This sense of aliveness can be attributed to things that may appear inanimate, and thus we can have relations, rules, and obligations regarding all being in the universe. In this way, we share structure and elements of all being in the universe among all our relations, our kin. And Maureen Schwartz puts it this way. This is so in the Navajo world, where non-human entities, homes, birds, mountains, baskets, have qualities of personhood, where membership in the community of life is based on shared composition and structure, and where the boundaries of persons are extended by synecdoche. Navajo people are taught from earliest childhood to consider phenomena such as the earth, sky, sun, moon, rain, water, lightning, and thunder to be living kin. Metaphors are easily drawn from entities and persons because all share structure, directionality, and elements, moisture, air, substance, heat, vibration, permeates. The abstraction of the base of a mountain or other entity and the base or feet of a person are similar enough to bear relationship to the other. In the vibration of an earthquake, the base of a mountain and base of a human share a kinship of vibrating and responding to that vibration. So also for plants, animals, and other being of our cosmos that share substance and structure. These interconnections of effect create a fundamental reality, an ontology and metaphysics that ground metaphorical concepts of story. Access to understanding this philosophic system of metaphors, causation, action, and rules of behavior are embedded in practices that reproduce the active system of cognition that dictate choices in our universe. In Diné thought, the universe exists prior to humans. Thus, humans are made in the image of that prior universe. To understand the metaphorical nature of Diné philosophy is to understand the structural organizational interactions of sameness, opposites, and synecdoche that interconnect all entities, all kinship relations in past and present worlds. In such a world, all being is to be treated as kin. All being is kin. Power based on knowledge must be used or manipulated to transmit effect between and among entities. And as kin, all entities are to be treated with compassion and cooperation. The core of this ancestral knowledge is held in collections of vivid narratives or Diné oral history of storytelling. It is most effectively taught by a metaphorical thought enacted in belief practices, ritual, and associative story, containing a metaphorical charter for the living of individuals and community life among all our relations, our kinship. There were subterranean worlds before this world, progressively referred to as black, blue, yellow, and white. Life began in the first world of Mother Earth, in the black world, much like a small floating island in a sea of water mist. In this world, fundamental elements of life, moisture, air, substance, and heat were finite, and yet in a constant flux or vibration. There were four cardinal points, and four columns of vaporous matter, each of the different color, each containing moisture, air, substance, and heat. The column of the white in the east and black in the north met in the east to form a male being, accompanied by a perfect ear of white corn made of white shell. And the blue column of the south and yellow column of the north met in the west to form a female being, accompanied by a perfect ear of corn, yellow corn, made of abalone shell. Now some say this is first man and first woman who directed the generative processes in the first and subsequent worlds. A holy wind was placed at each cardinal direction with a set of boy and girl, and separately and in combination, these holy winds and powerful personages direct all life, movement, thought, and planning on the earth's surface. Chaos and disorder of the other worlds caused Diné to travel a journey upward to each of the new worlds. And there is a place of emergence into each surface world, including the earth's surface world. In the last underworld, the first male and female of human-like form were created. Human persons were created as earth's surface people on earth by changing woman, who instructed the Diné to live within the geographical area of four sacred mountains and gave rules to govern relations among all beings. An understanding of this web of relations was given to Diné by the holy people who gave Diné rules of behavior to govern the core of Diné's social life. I will leave the notions of story, metaphor, and origins now and move to spirit being in place. A significant feature of the stories I mentioned is that most nations have a sacred center at a particular place, such as a river or rivers, mountains, plateaus, lakes, gulfs. From this center, from these places, we locate our place according to the four directions and ourselves in that place. Where Diné, for example, tell who they are, they tell of the places of their people, and there are many places that there are many settlements of Diné in the Four Corners region. What is important here is that this sense of place provides a permanent rootedness for the people, their identity, purpose, and ways of life. Because of the importance of these places, being born in a perfect place, one of harmony and balance, is for Diné and all Native nations to establish a harmonious relationship with all that they encompass in the world. Diné accept responsibility for maintaining balance with nature and subsequently with our own identity. This very last couple pages. Where we belong, life, land, spirit. We are guided by such story metaphors of physical place in all of our relations. And these relations guide our attention to our reciprocal responsibilities to all our relations within our nations. There is no linear path to conquer, no manifest destiny, but rather a cyclical universe wherein we continue wherein we continually and in relationship define who and what we are in consonance with our surrounding universe. Our origin stories orient us to the universe, including our place within that universe with all being. It is these places, rather than events of war or conquering, that locate and define our being in the world and how we are to act as human persons among all persons within that world. All life-defining moments for Dene and Indian nations happen within the context of these places and relations throughout time and occupy in our metaphysics, ontologies, epistemologies, aesthetics, and hence values of life. To say that Dene are indigenous to the land is to say that all of who and what we are begins and continues through the land we are given and are told how to live upon. This is the basis of our indigeneity: life, land, spirit. Our relationship to the United States of America comes from an extension of our cultural identity. It is this spiritual meaning of place and self that resides within us as we come into being among our relatives and all our relations. Or as we say sometimes, without we, there is no I. For this ontology is key to understanding ourselves and our place within the universe, with all attendant rights and responsibilities are given to us and maintained by us. As Greg Cajete writes in Look to the Mountain, we are born of the earth, of our place. And this is the metaphorical I can't say it. It's getting late here. And this is the metaphorical place that Indians talk about. Life is sacred, and life is one of the vehicles that holds our lives and spirit together. We are of this land, and this land is us. There is a common notion in Indigenous thought that if something is used for a purpose, it is alive. For example, my cup is a part of me, it calms my nerves, it fits my hand, it holds my water. Metaphors are about how one thinks of things. We may say that all of life is animated, in flux, and we are of the land in this way. Our bodies are intimate to a place, and our spirit is the life of our land, just as the land is the spirit of our lives. So where do Indigenous people belong? Where we belong: life, land, spirit. Thank you again. Yuval?
Thank you so much for that. We're not hearing the applause because everybody's muted, but it's there. So I'm going to open it up maybe to some questions from the panelists, from the students first, and then in the meantime, I'll encourage the audience out there to type in your questions in the Q&A function, and I can ask them on your behalf. But to start with, do any of the students have any questions or comments or discussions? Hannah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much, Professor Waters, for your speech. I learned a lot from it. A question I was wondering, in a piece we read by Professor Burkhardt, you are cited as discussing the idea that there are no anomalies in Indigenous philosophy, since the big picture is never finished. And I think this is a question you probably touched on a bit in your speech regarding how people are continually defining who and what we are in consonance with the surrounding universe. So I was wondering if you wanted to elaborate on that at all, because that was an idea that really struck me.
Well, Hannah, that's a very good question. And I'm hoping you're misquoting Brian. I've known Brian since he was an undergraduate student. He's a fine scholar. But let me be clear. There are anomalies in a native universe, of course. An anomaly is a very special thing. I won't use the word sacred, but let's say special. The traditional non-mainstream, I think you used the word Western, Yuval, scientific approach would be to look for a consonance, a continuity of sameness. And if you have an anomaly, if you're making a graph, for example, don't pay attention to those anomalies. Ah, that was a spurt up there. No. Throw that one away. We're not interested. We just keep going where we're going with a purpose in mind. In Indigenous thought, and I found this to be true not only in the Americas, but also, for example, in Australia, anomalies are special because they lead us to think about and perhaps go about seeking knowledge in a place that we might not otherwise look, right? So I hope you're misquoting Brian, but no, anomalies are definitely present. I think that's the way it is, yeah. Does that satisfy you, or you need more? Were you giving a direct quote there by any chance? Oh, I know what you're talking about. It just came to me. When Brian says there are no anomalies in Indigenous thought, and if he's quoting me, what I would have meant is anomalies are special things to be going after and following, and to keep within the whole picture. So is there an anomaly in the Western scientific sense of an anomaly that you throw out? No, but there would still be anomalies, and they would be very special. They would lead us to new information, yeah, about ourselves and the world, the universe. Thank you. Very good question, huh? I appreciate that. I appreciate that clarification. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is very clarifying.
Yeah, I have to talk to Brian about that.
Yeah. I'll be getting some emails from us. Any other questions? More questions from the students? Yeah, Nikki, please.
Thank you again for coming. This was very clear, and I think I understood everything you said, and it makes me very excited to explore more. I had a question based on the small remark you just made, because this is something we were also thinking about in our discussion, about how much we can relate First Nations and American Indian thought to like Maori philosophy in New Zealand, or in Aboriginal philosophy in Australia, and how does that relationship even make sense to do right now, or to leave them as separate entities of two completely different Indigenous peoples, but at the same time we're all one human race, and we did have one origin too.
That's an excellent question. I'm thinking of a book by Jim Maffei about Nawa thought. And he tries to compare some ideas, and it becomes problematic for philosophers because the language sometimes gets in the way. It's hard to write a sentence using language if what the language means to me is different from the language means to you. Even if we've got the same language, I mean, it's hard enough with different language, but even if we've got the same language, we can have problems here. And so I think that it will happen. I think that scholars will take up these comparative analysis. I think it's very important. I've learned a lot from looking at other cultures. But I do think that as we do this, we should go very carefully and always be aware that, as I read earlier, right at the beginning of the paper, and tried to emphasize in a couple of places here, metaphor, and I cannot say that word enough this evening. We must understand stories are not stories in the Western sense of stories. Stories are metaphors. Let me give you an example. Santa Claus is a metaphor for hope, right? Also how to behave, for generosity, for thinking of others, right? It's really about Santa Claus, right? In some sense, we know that. Okay, but at a very early age, that metaphor operates to link us to something, to key us into something that we have then the rest of our life. And as we progress and we become children who become older and we go through puberty, we have our own children and we transfer those metaphors to those children. They remain metaphors the same, sometimes changed, but sometimes the same. But we become more aware of what they mean. We get a deeper understanding. Some people say we go to a higher and higher level of understanding. So metaphors, I would think, or I wouldn't think, I know, I think, are very important in all Indigenous communities. And I suppose they're important when we talk about the solstice, a time when the days will be longer, the sun will be greater, our crops will be growing. Okay, so solstice itself is a metaphor for all of these things that have been celebrated. Similarly, we have a Canalda ceremony for Dene women as they approach puberty. The ceremony itself, the origin of the universe, how humans came to be, how men and women came to be. And as I said earlier, boys have a similar ceremony with the men in the sweats, where we learn about relations between men and women who are different sorts of beings in different ways. Our bodies are different. So I think that your question is very good. And I would say, stay within that realm of metaphor. You know, the stories are important for that reason. We need to understand that there are similarities, and I've talked with people about this. And the research is going there, and things I question about it. I hadn't quite thought about philosophy going there. I come from a world when nobody was talking about American Indian philosophy. You know, they told Vine Deloria, Indians can't do philosophy, right? But we did, and we do, and we're still doing it. And so I think you're right, Nikki. It's coming, and perhaps you'll be someone to write about it. I look forward to that. Yeah. Does that get the question? Thank you. Good.
I think you would be great at that. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the students? I'd like. Oh yes, Maura, go ahead, please.
This might be a bit of an open-ended question, but something we discussed in class too, which is sort of similar to what Nikki asked, was the idea of personhood appearing in
could you speak a little bit louder? I couldn't. The idea of what?
The idea of personhood appearing in multiple philosophies we've read about. I wondered if you'd be willing to talk a little bit more about personhood.
As I think of it conceptually, Maura, there are many different kinds of persons. Birds can be persons. Deer, antelope. So what is personhood? Well, personhood is a way of being a person, is what I think of it as I'm thinking of it now. It tells me how my human personhood is going to be different from the bird personhood or the basket personhood. Can we have personhood in basket? I tend to think we can, because the principle synecdoche, you have a creator of a basket, and part of that person by synecdoche goes into that basket. And of course, this was part of the difficulties with having so many of our quote unquote artifacts put into museums, removed from their places, because if some things are removed from their geographical place, they may lose that part of their personhood that synecdoted together. Got a new word here, I'm not sure. But and in some cases, what you need to do is repatriate those objects back to their geographical location or to their artists who created them. So there are many different kinds of person, and there are many different kinds of personhood is the way I would respond to that. I hope that's helpful, Maura. Good question. You all are just fantastic. Good students. Great. I'm having fun. I hope others are.
So good. In fact, I wonder if I could ask a kind of version of Maura's question.
Okay.
And take us a little bit into the ethical sphere. So one of the things I find really challenging, but also groundbreaking in what I've heard today is the idea that something like a mountain or a sacred place can be a person, and insofar as it is, it should enjoy some of the rights of a person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that many of us are familiar with the idea. I'll just speak for myself. I'm familiar with the idea, but I think most will relate to this, that, you know, we ought to treat a certain location with respect, or treat a certain monument, if you will, with respect, whether it's a natural monument or an artificial monument, because a human person identifies with it in a certain way, or because it means something to a human person, or we often hear about future generations of people, right? We shouldn't damage this place because what about the future generations of people? They won't be able to enjoy it. But to me, there is an idea, at least if I'm understanding you correctly, maybe I'm not, but there's an idea in part of what you said in this way of thinking that that's kind of backwards, that actually some places have rights. It's for this mountain's sake. It has a right to not be molested, right? To not be misused in a certain way. It's not because we want it for future generations. I mean, that would be nice too, but there's a fundamental right of places and of some what we would call things. So that's kind of an idea that I suppose involves the notion of a person. I just wanted to know if I got that right and if you wanted to sort of add to that or expand on it.
Yeah, I think you got that right, Yuval. I remember writing something in a paper years ago where there was, and I can't remember, it was one of the South American countries that actually legislated rights to trees. It was where the trees were just being thrown down. Of course, the local indigenous people, to them, these trees were alive. They were part of their life and had been for many, many generations. And they have life and hence they're animated. And if you're animated, you're going to act, following through the philosophical analysis here. And if you're going to act, then you have to have some sort of behavior patterns. You have to know what your duties are and what your responsibilities are. Now, this might sound strange unless you understand that perhaps the tree thinks and perhaps the river thinks. And is there a sense in which we can think of these things as thinking? Yeah, we're getting there too. We can't keep killing all our relations. And you can see already we're having problems with that in the universe, in the nature, in the world, whatever part of the world you live in. Climate, whirlwinds coming in. What do you call them? Japan had the waters coming upon them. I think that some people say there's a fine line between the rights of, for example, the trees or the mountains and the rights of people. I don't think the line is real fine. Of course, we have to protect humans and we have to protect that which gives us life. And I wouldn't be able to breathe here today, nor would you if it were not for the trees. They continue to do their job very well. And in that sense, I would say, metaphorically speaking, they're doing their duties. They have certain responsibilities, and I have certain responsibilities to them. Perhaps a good metaphor for this would be the story about the growing of the corn and the squash and the beans, who are mutually reciprocal, right? They have certain duties and responsibilities that they perform, and they perform them very well. We take care of the corn and the corn takes care of us. And whether it's the blue corn or the black corn or the yellow corn or the white corn, it's all corn. And it's all stuff that keeps us alive, that gives us life. And reciprocally then, if we want things to stay alive, we want to give them life as well. Does that sort of get added a little bit?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's a big question.
Yeah, that's my
the trees, the monuments. Yeah, fundamentally, I think it's important to say at this point too, within the context of this topic, that I don't think there's anybody I've ever talked about in an Indian country who has not thought that Indigenous people are, first of all, pragmatic. I think Scott Pratt wrote some work on this and somebody else did as well. So that pragmatism, look, if you want to eat, you better take care of the veggies, you know, and then those veggies are going to take care of you. So there is something going on there. And of course, it's life. What the vegetable gives us is life within us. We don't live without that sustenance, without that synecdoche, the transfer of the properties of the corn to myself, right? Yeah, I'll sort of stop on my head on that one. Good question again. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions from the students? And
of course, the mountain is sacred because it's life, right? It's full of life. That's important. Why are places sacred? Because they have life. To a synecdoche, I would say.
It's actually a beautiful thought to end on. I like that a lot. If we don't have any more questions, then we will let Dr. Waters go. It's a little later over there than it is here.
It certainly is. In fact, I was going to read a poem, which I usually do at presentations, but not tonight. It's too late.
Too late for
Perhaps
poetry.
another time.
Well, we would love to have you back in person under different circumstances. We really appreciate your thoughts and your time tonight.
And I do appreciate the students who, some of you may not have even gotten dinner before you had to get on to the Zoom, right? I appreciate your participation. Your questions were just great. Wonderful students, just marvelous.
Agreed on all of that.
You're so lucky to have them.
So thank you all for coming. Hopefully we'll see you at the remaining, I think, 2 events we have. And have a great night, everybody. Be safe.